Hey guys, Basement Horrors here, and welcome to True Horror Stories number 31. Today, I have 4 stories for you guys to listen to and enjoy. Let's get right into it. And I just wanted to say real quick, I am recording in an office building, and so if you hear any background noise, it's just people doing their jobs. I'm sorry. Number 1. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and thought that this Reddit could use a creepy story. There are no jump scares or gross stuff, it's just creepy. And this isn't a story I made up. This happened to me as a kid between the ages of 7 or 8. And I grew up in a part of town that you could, now that it's been gentrified and roads redone and young professionals living there, call the suburbs. I was mugged a lot when I was younger though, so it wasn't the best part of town 15 years ago, just for an idea of where I lived. I used to play baseball with the kids on my block, which turned into kickball after what this story is about happened too many times. The batter would stand in my driveway, and the pitcher would stand on a sewer drain, which has since been paved over. Across the street from that was a large open storm drain. Not the sewer bars you usually see, and a manhole on top. A lot of times, our baseball would just find themselves lodged in the storm drain. At the time, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and was very adventurous and curious. I always volunteered to be lowered into the manhole and into the narrow passage below to fetch the baseballs. I was small enough to fit, and Will, my neighbor, always refused to go down there. These were storm drains. I don't know much about sewers, but these tunnels were larger than normal pipes, the kind that a small child could fit into. This particular day, I hit a line drive straight into the sewer. Everyone sighed as I ran up to my house to get my dad, who would open the manhole with a crowbar. He came out and opened it, and I eagerly walked up to jump in. My dad gave me a flashlight as usual, and I climbed down into the small drain. The ball was not down in the main passage, or in the pipe facing the other side of the road where the storm drain was. I turned and looked down the bigger flood drain, and saw the ball about 10 feet in. The main drain that I climbed into acted like a funnel that fell into where I was at. I said that I found it and crawled into the drain. It was dry and smelled like lake water. I kept going. 10 feet is a bit far for a 4'0" kid. When I reached the ball, I noticed that there was some kind of flood room built under the hill and houses across the street. I guess the water could collect there, and as I said, I was curious. I wasn't going to go into the room, but it would be cool if I could find a cool hideout spot to go to, or a place for me and my friends to hang out. It seemed pretty cool to a 7-year-old who never even had a treehouse. I crawled further into the pipe and shined my flashlight into the room. There were 4 or 5 trash bags that looked like they were full of clothes and food, and on top of a cheap-looking wooden desk, which had lots of water damage on the legs. There was a single-sized mattress, dirty and ugly, on top of a dozen stacked milk crates that were duct taped together. I was pretty scared, and before I retreated, I found there were water bottles and food wrappers on the ground. I never went down the passage again, and a few years later, I got too big to even fit in the passage. One last thing is that the room, as I remember, was about 15 feet wide and 15 feet long, which led to a 10-foot decline/ramp with 3 other even larger sewer passages, big enough for an adult to walk in. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to do this, but would anybody be interested in an urban exploration bit where I go back through my parents' house and try to find the sewers and try to find the room? I never told anybody that happened until years later, after the road and drains were redone and I couldn't go back down there. It's weird to think that someone might have been living in the sewers below your house as a kid. And it was pretty creepy. Number 2. We don't deserve dogs. I was inspired to share this after another poster shared their story of their awesome dog, and I had to tell the story of my hero too. This was about a year ago. I had just gotten married, and though we were rich in love, we were far from rich financially. We lived in a dilapidated old house my husband had borrowed from his late grandparents' estate until we got on our feet. It was in a bad neighborhood, but we were surrounded by good people. I grew up in a crime-ridden country, and honestly, most of the US, even the bad areas, are heaven. So I was cautious, but never completely uncomfortable. My husband is a firefighter, so he works 24 hours at a time. And my biggest comfort was our 65-pound pit bull and plot hound Candy. She's a sweetheart, and unless you're a squirrel, she would never hurt you. She'd taken a liking to me since I moved in, and when my husband started working 24-hour shifts, she would follow me around the house, never leaving my side. One evening, a storm broke out. They make Candy so nervous, so when she started acting up, I didn't think much of it. I was playing video games when I heard tapping at the window. Every time I paused the game, it would stop. I just assumed that it was a tree hitting the window in the wind, but decided to switch off the light and TV in that room in case. I went to let Candy out for her last potty break, and as soon as I opened the door, she dashed to the right, to my horror, towards the window that the tree was tapping on. I didn't hear anything weird, and the yard was too dark to see anything. I called her back in and locked everything. I texted my hubby, but he was on call and didn't get back to me for a while. Candy and I went to bed. I must have dozed off for a while, but I was awoken to Candy growling really low and deep. I'd never heard anything like it. I knew something was up as soon as I heard it. I stood up and grabbed a machete and stood still listening. Then, Candy went ballistic, running from window to window throughout the house, barking and growling. I was dialing my father-in-law, knowing he'd get there before police, when I heard a window smash in another bedroom. Candy was there in a flash, although I desperately tried to call her back, afraid they'd shoot her or hurt her. I heard a scream and more glass smashing, and then yelling getting further and further away. Then silence. I crept to the window, and there was blood everywhere. Candy had a bloody shirt sleeve in her mouth, and was wagging her tail sitting in the backyard looking chuffed. She'd been nicked jumping out the broken window, but was otherwise unharmed. Hubby and Uncle arrived minutes later. We never called the police. I wanted to, but they are very untrusting of local police in general, and were also scared Candy would get put down. Needless to say, Candy got a puppuccino and lots of love, and we moved pretty quickly after that. Rescue dogs are a special kind of wonderful. The scariest part of this was their persistence, even though they could surely hear the dog losing it. My theory is that they were local and had met Candy out on a walk, and seen how friendly and social she was, and hoped that she wouldn't actually attack. My other theory is that my husband had a really crazy ex who was stalking him relentlessly at the time. She could have told someone that the dog is loud but not aggressive. That's a little far-fetched though, I think. Number 3. This happened in the early 90s. I grew up in a sprawling suburban outside of Atlanta. My town was mostly made up of used car lots, strip malls, and office parks surrounded by residential areas. I was about 16, living with my dad in a huge, semi-secluded apartment off of a highway. There was absolutely nothing to do around here but hang out at the Waffle House, which was a couple miles walk from my home. My dad was pretty strict, so on school nights I would often sneak out around midnight after he was asleep and walk up to the Waffle House to see if any of my friends were around. I used to really enjoy these walks, as I liked the solitude, the night air, and listening to loud music in my headphones. To get to the Waffle House, I would have to walk up my empty highway, cut through some office parks, and an empty movie theater plaza. I was never afraid, as I believed my 16-year-old, 95-pound riot girl self to be a total badass. Anyway, one night walking home at around 2 a.m., as I was walking through the movie theater parking lot, an older redneck man pulled up next to me and asked me if I wanted to ride. This parking lot was huge and very far removed from the main highway. I pulled off my headphones and said no thank you, and then kept on my way. A few minutes later, the same man circles back around the parking lot and asks me if I want to get high with him. I say no, and he asks me again if I'm sure. At this point, I feel like something is a bit off, and must have a weird face because he peels off. Thinking I've seen the last of him, I go to cut across the empty plaza where I would exit out into the empty back lot / dumpster area before the empty office parks start. That's when I noticed that this man has pulled his car around by the dumpster and turned off his lights, just idling there in the dark, presumably waiting for me. I have never run so fast in my life. I ended up running to a 24-hour Crystals that was across the highway. The workers in there wouldn't let me in, but did agree to call my dad to come pick me up while I cried at the door. My dad wasn't even that mad at me. I am totally convinced that I escaped something terrible that night. I wish I could say I never snuck out again, but I continued to do stupid shit all throughout my youth. Number 4. This happened when I was a kid. My dad passed away when I was 3 years old, so my mom had to work on a factory most of the time to be able to support us. We lived in Mexico, and her schedule was different depending on the needs of the factory. So during certain nights, she would leave me in the care of my neighbors or family members, or whoever was able to take care of me during the daytime or during the night. One of our neighbors was this nurse who had 2 sons and a daughter living with her, but they all had their own rooms. But they were all separate and connected by a kitchen area. The kitchen was always unlocked, as everyone in our town knew each other very well. I stayed with the youngest son, who was a teenager back then. I was around 7 years old, and he was around 14 or 15. One of the nights that I stayed with them, it was very rainy. It rained all day and all night, and the house was surrounded by trees, which is common in Mexico. And the noise that the trees made was very loud, but very soothing to me. That night I woke up, but was half asleep, so I kept my eyes closed when I heard someone walking. I thought maybe it was the other guy coming from the restroom, so I was still with my eyes closed. I didn't hear him get into bed, so I slowly opened my eyes, not completely, just very slowly peeked. There was a man behind my bed staring at me while I slept. I couldn't tell who it was, so I made a movement, like if I was still asleep, just turning, and saw that the owner's son was still in bed sleeping. It was raining very hard, so I was scared and didn't know what to do. So I closed my eyes and fell asleep since I was still in a dreamlike state. In the morning when I woke up, I thought that maybe it was just my imagination and that the trees had somehow made a shadow of a man for me to see, and that the footsteps were really just the movement of the trees. But when I looked down to the floor, there were some very big, muddy footprints imprinted on the floor. I told everyone, and no one in the house had their shoes that big, since we were all young and the woman of the house didn't have anything that big. After that night, she started to lock the doors to the kitchen, and to this day, I still remember the feeling of someone watching me sleep. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. They were some pretty creepy stories. If you did enjoy it and want more videos like this, tell me in the comments and give me a like. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. My videos are coming in at least once a week at this time. At the time of this release, it might be twice a week, I don't know yet. But I am making videos almost every day, and so I'm pushing out a lot of content for you guys, and I really hope you guys are enjoying it. If you are, please tell me, like I said in the comments, or if you have your own personal story or any questions, tell me about it in the comments, or send it to my email, or you can DM me on Instagram, and you should definitely add me on Snapchat, because I'm always posting about when I'm recording and what I'm recording and all that fun stuff. So yeah, until the next video, next week, or maybe in just a few days, have a horrific day.